After a week of sailing, we are now 800 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. Just the two of us, taking turns between sailing and sleeping, as we sail Florence non-stop across the ocean, 24 hours a day. We are now well into our fourth major ocean crossing, and we are about to reach the most significant milestone of our entire 6-year voyage so far. We are Matanami. We have spent the last 6 years sailing our 37-foot sailboat Florence around the world. In that time we have crossed 3 oceans. Over 36,000 miles have passed under our keel, and we are now closing in on our goal, to complete our circumnavigation.
Before us lies the Atlantic Ocean, which we will now cross twice, in order to reach the shores of England once more.
After so many miles at sea, we feel at home on the ocean, and have become used to bending to our ever-changing moods.
It's Monday morning again, which means that we have been at sea for a full week. We should have been arriving in a couple of days from now. The passage should have taken 9.5 days in total, given our average normal speed, but because of the light winds that we had right at the start, it's probably going to take us more like 11 days. It'll be what it'll be. Neither of us are in a huge rush to get there, although we're really looking forward to seeing St Helena Island. It's just been really enjoyable to be out at sea and sailing again. The weather's looking a bit more unsettled this morning. We've got a few squall clouds around, but none of them so far have brought any big increases of wind, so hopefully that'll stay the case as we approach St Helena.
With the boat rolling so much, if we're not on watch or cooking, the best place to be is wedged into the bunk. How's the book?
Yeah, it's good. It's not the first time I've read it, but yeah, it's good to relive. These guys went a lot of the places that we went to, so relive our Pacific crossing at the moment.
It's a grey day out here today. Pretty steady winds. We've had pretty steady winds for the last few days. There's not been a lot we've needed to do sailing wise. 3 reefs in the main, just let a bit of Genoa in and out as the breeze goes up and down. It's been steady in direction. We've got about 300 miles to go, and to be honest, it's been so steady for the last few days that I haven't even bothered to download an up-to-date forecast, but it's quite rolly, and that's what's making it a bit difficult to do things on board. I just said to Amy, I'm a bit bored, and she said, well, there's plenty you can do, there's plenty of cleaning that needs doing, but it's really difficult to do any of that stuff when you're getting thrown around like this, or at least that's my excuse. So we've just been playing a game of cards, and we actually had to hold the cards down because they were going flying all over the place. But 300 miles to go now, so that's 2 days if we're doing a decent 6 knots. We're doing around 6 knots at the moment, so hopefully we're nearly there and we can go and explore St Helena.
sea state's eased off a bit this morning, but there are loads of raining clouds around which bring an increase in the wind, and they're also changing its direction. So it means that there's a lot more work involved in terms of reefing and unreefing the sails to make sure we keep moving, and also trying to make sure that we stay on course as well. Just had one pass through, so I'm soaking wet, and it looks like there's another one coming in a few minutes.
When we see a squall approaching, we reef the sails to make them smaller in preparation for the increase in wind speed. Once the squall has blown through, we unreef the sails to keep Florence up to speed in the lighter winds that follow. Morning.
Morning. You look very blurry-eyed.
I've just woken up. Oh, I haven't just woken up. I got woken up by the rain. And I was very happy that I wasn't out in the rain. It was my off watch. And I was snug in bed. And now my alarm's gone off and I have to get up. Would you like a cup of tea?
How very romantic.
It was very romantic of you, dear, to look after Florence in the rain so that I didn't have to get out and get soaked. Looks a bit wet. At least that'll wash it all in the mid-desert below, hopefully.
No, I think there's a lot more Namib Desert to wash off, unfortunately.
Tea?
Tea, yes please.
We're about to cross a line at sea. Now normally we celebrate things like crossing the equator, but this is way bigger than crossing the equator. This is possibly the most momentous line in our entire circumnavigation of the globe so far. We're about to cross the same line of longitude as Portsmouth Harbour entrance, which is where we left England from 6 years ago. And once we've crossed this line, that technically means that we sailed around the world. We've crossed all lines of longitude and the equator. So that is something to celebrate.
Lines of longitude, also called meridians, are the imaginary lines that divide the Earth. They run north to south from pole to pole, but they measure distance east or west of the prime meridian in Greenwich, England.
We may have been a little bit early on pouring them wrong because the wind's died and we're just going slower and slower as we get towards the line and watching the GPS countdown.
So to pass the time, we reminisced about the last 6 years of our voyage around the world.
Where was your favourite place then?
You know I can't narrow it down to just one country. I guess I could narrow it down to an ocean, and for me that has to be the South Pacific. Like, every one of those islands was just everything that we'd ever dreamt of, and I'll never forget our landfall in the Marquesas after a month at sea, surrounded by nothing but blue ocean, and then just these green pinnacles as we approach Fatu Hiva. Like, it gives me tingles now just even remembering it.
Do you remember like when we first went ashore and trying to walk on land after being at sea for 33 days?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the fact that we've been at sea for a month or if we've just kind of got used to being at sea a little bit more, but I don't think I've ever had that feeling again. How about you?
The Pacific was amazing, but there is one country that stands out just a tiny bit more for me, and that was Vanuatu. I mean, when I think back to the most amazing experiences we've had on this trip, a lot of them were in Vanuatu. Being invited to 5 weddings and a funeral in one day, just because we turned up on a beach, and then the chief said, "How long are you staying?" We said, "Well, just one night." "Why?" And he said, "Well, it's my son's wedding in 3 days' time. I'd like you to come." And we're just like, "Yeah, okay, why not?" And it just led to the most amazing experience.
Yeah, there were so many amazing experiences in Vanuatu, and I think part of that was because the culture was so far removed from what we're used to, but the people were just so open that we got invited to so many different things.
I think it was also because by that point in the trip we had relaxed and become much more open to experiences, so when people offered something, our stock answer was just yes. And like when we were on Erromango and those kids were like, "Do you want us to take you somewhere
do you want us to take you to a waterfall? We said yes to a bunch of machete-wielding kids that then took us off up a river inland, and we went so far inland that at that point we had to stop them and say it's going to be dark before we get back unless we turn around. And bless them, they didn't really know where a waterfall was. They just wanted to take us, and that's a sort of experience that we would not have been open to when we started cruising. So we have changed a lot to enable us to actually be open to say yes to things like that.
Yeah, they were brilliant, and they just kept running off into the jungle to find us food and bring us back things to try, and we just tried everything that they gave us.
Good.
Yeah, but Vanuatu was just so different to anywhere. People believed in black magic, and I mean, they have an active volcano.
Yeah, standing on the edge of an active volcano, that was not something I'd ever envisaged doing in my life, but it was amazing.
What's your least favourite place then?
Probably Cologne. I wouldn't really want to go back there. We were only there, weren't we, because we had to be there to check in for the Panama Canal, but it's such a dangerous city that we weren't allowed to go anywhere apart from in a taxi. Too dangerous to walk, and the anchorage where we stayed was terrible. We could have made our lives a lot easier by going into the marina, but the marina was so expensive, wasn't it? And at that time, we had no idea how much the round-the-world trip was going to cost us or how long our savings were going to last, so we were trying to avoid spending any money where we didn't have to. What's your least favourite place then?
It has to be the Malacca Straits. There's so many different reasons why I don't really want to go back there. The dirty water, the busiest shipping lane in the world, dodging fishing boats that are unlit at night with fishing nets and fishing platforms, and all of that lightning. I think it was the lightning that was the worst.
So this is the fun and games of sailing up the Malacca Straits at night. We've got a massive thunder and lightning storm. It's just like burst right over us. The wind switched through 180 degrees. We've got fishing boats doing 180-degree turns around us, and you can barely see through the rain. It's just hammering down. The wind's really just picked up really quickly. And it really doesn't help that our wind instruments are packed up as well, so we've got no wind direction other than looking up at the masthead. You can't do that because your eyes get stung by the rain.
That's a fishing boat.
Yeah, last night I just wanted to give up. I'd had enough.
When have you been most scared out in the ocean?
That would definitely be when we were passing Colombia. It's actually the only time that I've felt scared by the wind and waves out on the ocean. The waves were big enough and steep enough that they could have rolled Florence upside down if we'd got sideways onto them. So I was properly scared.
Yeah, although it was blowing 50 knots at the time, it wasn't really the wind that was the problem as much as the size of the waves.
What about you?
I find the lightning really scary. I love it when we're on land, but anytime we're out in the ocean and we've got a big metal mast sticking up in the air and we're the only thing for hundreds of miles, and there's absolutely nothing that we can do to try and stop it.
And if we got struck badly enough, it could come down the mast, punch a hole out through the hull and sink us.
Yep. Yeah, basically it makes me feel really vulnerable. I don't like it.
I hate lightning. That's why I hate the doldrums, because there's so much lightning and so many storms around when we go through that area.
Yeah, and that's the Malacca Straits all over again.
But what about when we were crossing the Pacific and that little fishing boat approached us in the middle of nowhere?
When we first set off, I felt really vulnerable to not only pirates, but people potentially boarding the boat in an anchorage. And when we were becalmed at sea crossing the Pacific, I think we were about 300 miles off the coast of Ecuador, and we were approached by 3 guys on an open boat who came alongside asking for food and water. And some of the stories that I'd read were people doing exactly that. And so I was genuinely really scared. I just wanted them to go away as soon as possible.
And you were terrified. You shouted down to me and I ran up on deck in my underwear and ended up fending off this boat that was alongside us with my feet with these 3 fishermen in it. And yes, it was scary, but at the end of the day, they just wanted to give us a fish and have a chat.
All they wanted was to have a chat and to interact with us, and they even offers us a shark.
Yeah, now we were pointing at the shark on the deck of the boat, and they were like, "You want the shark?" And we were like, "No, no, no." So they gave us a tuna, which was very nice.
When they left, I regretted not giving them more, and I also regretted not having a more positive interaction with them. I feel like I really missed out on that, because they were just like us. They were hundreds of miles out to sea. They'd been at sea for days, and they were just after interacting with another human.
What surprised you most about the whole experience of sailing around the world so far?
For me, it's how nice people are and how many kind and positive people there are all the way around the world. And if you focus on the news, then it's very, very hard to see that. But actually travelling and being in situations where you're quite vulnerable and occasionally in need of help, it really allows you to see just how kind people are.
Yeah, the only real negative experience with people we've had is when we were boarded at night in Indonesia once, and that was pretty scary, but we were more angry than scared, I think, at the time, defending our home, and we just left into the night, didn't we? I guess before we set off, I actually thought the sailing would be more difficult, because everything I'd read about sailing around the world, I guess, was more about racing. So people were pushing boats harder, and it was all about big waves and big winds and all these things breaking. And yes, we broke a lot of stuff when we were sailing across the Atlantic on the first ocean crossing, basically because we weren't very good sailors or very good cruisers at the time. But
We were just pushing too hard.
yeah, we were pushing the boat way too hard. But now, actually, the sailing generally is a lot easier than I thought it would be. I mean, it's still difficult in terms of sleep deprivation and in terms of just the scale of it, in terms of time. But actually, day to day, because we're not pushing the boat and we pick our weather windows very carefully to make sure we don't face storms, it's actually a lot easier than I thought it would be.
I think a lot of that is down to learning how to choose our weather windows. And I also think there's an awful lot that we've got used to, and conditions that I would have previously thought were rough when we first set off. Now it's just kind of standard ocean sailing.
Yeah, when we first set off 35 knots in the Bay of Biscay, I was sat in the bottom of the cockpit thinking, this is fairly serious. Whereas these days, if we're going downwind in 35 knots of wind, that's just, oh great, we're going to go really fast and make good speed, and I'm not too worried. What's your favourite and least favourite thing about ocean passages?
My favourite thing is the total disconnect that I get when we set off on a new ocean passage. I feel like the world is on pause, and I only need to focus on what happens within the 37-foot space of Florence, and life becomes really simple.
We've probably got another 2 months from now, because by the time there's not going to be much internet in St Helena, and there's not going to be much in Fernando, so it's going to be a couple of months before we reconnect again on the other side of this ocean.
Yeah, and I guess I used to think that might drive me crazy, and spending up to a month at sea without sight of land, that it would actually affect me mentally negatively. But now I see ocean passages as a really positive opportunity to just disconnect and kind of reset.
Well, I agree with you that it's the disconnect for me, and just being there, not having to check in with emails or anything like that. And there's not like you're trying to have an excuse for it, it's just you can't, so you don't need to think about it, and
Yeah.
you just focus on other things.
And as long as you're moving forward, it's a positive day.
Yep. Moving forward and not broken anything.
Yeah. The hardest thing is definitely the lack of sleep. I mean, it's made worse by the fact that we sail without crew and just the two of us switching between our watches. But even without that, it's really hard to sleep on a boat.
Even when you're off watch, the motion of the boat makes it really difficult to sleep, doesn't it? It's just, it's not actually a regular rhythm. It's
No.
kind of a bit random with the waves, and you can often just be getting off to sleep, and then a big lurch will, wake you up.
Yeah, it's not just the motion, it's also the noise. Like, the noise has no rhythm.
Has it all changed how you think about the world?
It's definitely changed how I think about the size of the world. There's some things that make me feel like the world is a small place. Like, we meet the same people, the same cruisers in different countries.
Everybody follows the same route.
I feel like we know people in lots of places around the world.
You made it!
And it's so much easier to pick up a globe or pick up a map of the world and just kind of plan my route around it and imagine myself in a whole host of new places. But there's also something about sailing across an ocean at a slow jogging pace that makes you really understand the scale of it. I mean, I knew obviously that 70% of the world is ocean, but it's not until you've spent a month sailing across a tiny, tiny section of an ocean, when you're sailing non-stop 24/7, and you see what tiny progress you've made across a map, that it really hits home how big the world's oceans are. Personally, I think we've only sailed around the world when we actually cross our track, and that won't be until we sail up to Grenada, but I'm going to celebrate and have some rum anyway. I think Florence deserves some. Rum deserves something. Cheers!
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 What awesome! Well, I'm excited. I'm very excited. 6 years, awesome. It's been amazing. It's just been the two of us sailing Florence the whole way round, but we've had a lot of support from our family, friends and all our patrons to make this possible. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that believed in us, supported us, gave us moral support, physical support to make this happen. It is a dream. It's amazing. Thank you.
Next time, we sail on to the remote, isolated island of St. Helena, 1,200 miles out into the South Atlantic Ocean. Don't forget to subscribe to catch the next episode. We release a video every 2 weeks.
If you'd like to find out more about behind the scenes on Florence, track our progress across the oceans in real time, find out where we are right now, or ask us pretty much anything, then please head over to our Patreon site and join the crew.
We'd like to thank everyone who supports us to make these videos possible, and a special thank you to our staff patrons.